Hi, my name is Jossie. I'm a volunteer at WBAI. Volunteers, producers, and management at WBAI have come to the conclusion that fund drives have become too damn long. Don't get it twisted. We love connecting with our listeners and are honored by every single dollar your generosity has inspired you to give the station. But we prefer our unique WBAI programming to long fundraising periods. WBAI is committing right now to making a change. WBAI management is committed to shortening the length of our marathons. That's why from now until October 2nd, we're conducting a quiet campaign to raise funds prior to the start of the actual marathon. Visit WBAI.org to make a pledge and follow our progress via the thermometer on the website. There are new donation buttons which allow for smaller donations for listeners. If we can raise $50,000, we'll shorten our fall fundraiser by 2 days. Every little bit helps, so consider making a pledge today at WBAI.org. And thank you, as always, for your support.
It's 10 a.m. here in New York City. Just wanted to say again, my name is Michael G. Haskins, by the way, the station's chief announcer and your host and radio guide. And we understand that you tune in and listen and contribute because of the producers that you hear each and every day, each hour of every broadcast day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thanks to listeners just like you. Once again, it's 10 a.m. And coming up next, let's talk with John Kane.
In a race against the sun, make the most of my day, rising bright and early. Places to go, got people to see, miles to drive, and time for me.
Hey, thanks for joining us. This is Let's Talk with John Kane and with Johnny Rice. I want to welcome you to the program, and as always, I want to tell you first off how much of a pleasure it is for me to be here, what an honor it is for me to be a part of the WBAI family, to be a part of bringing something that is different than what you're going to get anyplace else. And I think that's what we try to do with this program. And I think that's what many of the programs in WBAI does. So that's the first thing I got to start off with. And of course, we are going to be running into fund drive mode here after this week. So, you know, I'm not sure. We do some schedule adjustments, so I'm not sure what my schedule will be over the next month. But let me start today by again telling you that how important it is that you donate to the station. My opportunity to be here is only possible because of listeners like you, who not only listen to the program but make contributions during fund drives and in between fund drives. And you can make a donation anytime. You can go to give2wbai.org. That's GIVE, the number 2, WBAI.org, and make a contribution. You can be a WBAI buddy. You can make a one-time donation, repeated donations. You can go to the product index and possibly make a donation for past premiums and premiums that are still in our inventory. Any number of things you can do, but certainly you can make a contribution. If you go to WBAI.org, you can also see a quick link to being able to text a donation. So I can't impress upon the listeners enough how important it is that they contribute, continue to contribute, and I know that you have, and you know, I can only hope that you will continue to do so. Of course, the other thing is I've got to suggest that we need more listeners. We need more people to be tuned in, and you can tune in obviously at 99.5 on the FM dial, but we also, this show in particular, and I know a few others, this show in particular streams live on Facebook. So if you perhaps have younger friends who, or you know, I know not everybody who hears us on the radio is into the social media thing. We do the social media thing because we're trying to reach not only those of you who are listening on the FM dial, but those of you who are into that and who do spend time on Facebook. So if you know folks who are on Facebook who you think would get something out of programs like this and some of the other programs, by all means, go on to Facebook. My group page is Let's Talk with John Kane, and we stream this show on that group page. And of course, I have another group page which is Let's Talk Native. So these are pages that will provide content, both the streaming of this video and a lot more other content. When we aren't streaming live, and this goes both for on WBAI.org and on the Facebook Live, the audio, the content stays up, so you can watch it after the fact. If you go to that group page, you will see while we're live, it'll say live, and then it'll when after the program, it'll say this program was live, and you can still catch the show in its entirety. You can go to the archives on WBAI and catch the show. So I encourage you. There's no reason not to catch the show if you want to. I know many people do miss the live show on FM. On the radio, and there are other options. So I put all that out there, and I say that because we do need to get reach out. We've got some great programming on WBAI. You know, Rebel Diaz comes to mind. We span, you know, the full mix of everything from old time radio to you know, to current hip hop and of course some of the news programs. Michael's program that runs through the morning and the week. And of course, what I try to bring in content. So I put all that out there in the hope that folks will tune us in and will take a listen. And of course, this program is a talkback show. So not only do you get to listen, but you get to participate. You get to call in. We usually do that in the second hour. If you are Facebook streaming, you can offer a comment anytime, and that's one of the other beauties of the interaction of social media. So. All right, so let me first of all let me welcome Shawnee.
Good morning.
Look, I want to thank everybody who came out last night. We did a screening of a couple of John Bowermaster's films. John wasn't able to make it because he ended up filming all the way up in Troy, New York yesterday, and it just didn't quite work out. But we did have Willis from the Newtown Creek cleanup organization, and he was featured in the film City of Water, which was the first film we showed, and then we showed Restoring the Clear Water, which, of course, any film that's going to feature a little bit of Pete Seeger is always good by us here at WBAI. So Pete was a big part of the movement to restore the clear water and that was probably in its second iteration. Now it's gone through its third. And the clear water is a Dutch sloop that was restored for the purpose of bringing attention to cleaning the waters of the Hudson and in the New York City area. And the films last night were all about that. I encourage you to go to HudsonRiverStories.com, and you can learn more about John Bowermaster's films and some of the work that some of those folks are doing. It was a good crowd. I mean, it wasn't a big crowd, but it was a good crowd, and we had some great interaction, some great conversation, and we're going to continue to do more. I'll see if we can't get more of those, some of those folks involved in that cleanup. One of the things that they featured was the Harbor School, and I found that encouraging because, one of the things. It was pointed out both by some of the folks who came out to the event last night and by Willis himself that there's a lot of white there. So a lot of the folks who were involved in these programs, there's not a whole lot of diversity, I guess. And the schools offer the opportunity to have more diversity, and part of it is just outreach. And, I encourage anybody. I don't care what your background is, what your nationality background is, what your racial background is, what your financial background is. We can all do a part in trying to restore some of the water. I mean, they refer to the waterways of New York as the sixth borough, because when you consider the massive amount of water from obviously from the Atlantic to the East River to the Hudson River, it's water is a significant part of New York City. But we cross it with bridges, and we go under it with tunnels, and maybe we take a ferry or two, but we almost can be oblivious when we're driving, because a lot of these waterways are just canals. They're not even, they're streams that have been turned into canals, put it that way. And they're not that accessible. You don't have like a lot of waterfront parks and that kind of stuff. So you can drive across these things and go by these things and not even be aware that they're there.
That's what I was also thinking about in terms of like just spaces like of gentrification, where all of the access and the activities on the water is happening is down in like in Gowanus, in that area. So that makes it a little bit harder to be inclusive when it's limited to the paddling and all of those, and the canoeing is like in one part of Lower Manhattan or in Brooklyn as well.
Yeah, and I think that's right, and I think people should be more. I mean, it's easy to go to a nice sandy beach, and enjoy that, but you realize that that water has many of its forms to it, and I think people have to be aware of that. Mm-hmm. Look, a couple things. I'm going to have a couple of folks join us during the program to talk about the event at the Apollo this weekend. But before they do that, I want to talk a little bit about. I know there was a lot of buzz associated with the whole NFL and the taking a knee and Colin Kaepernick stuff, and I got to talk a little bit about just 4 images that stuck in my mind. And I don't watch football. I mean, I used to, but And I don't even know if it's fair to say that I'm boycotting football, because there's a lot of reasons that I don't watch football, and among them have been the Colin Kaepernick whitelisting or blacklisting, whatever they want to call it. So there's that. But after this weekend, with the ridiculous just insulting comments from the president of the United States, referring, I guess he made it fashionable for people to say "son of a bitch" on radio, I guess, and on television and every place else. I heard it on NPR when he referred to anyone taking a knee, and of course they're totally mischaracterizing what Colin Kaepernick's protest is about. They're trying to make it about patriotism, when in reality the whole reason for him to take a knee during the national anthem was to protest the social injustice, the injustice to black people and people of color. But a couple of images stuck out, and I relating to these games. One, the gentleman who sung the national anthem in Detroit, Rico Lavella, He a black man, and I just got to know when they hire a black person to sing the national anthem in the midst of all this controversy, there's got to be a ton of white people like just almost gloating over it. So Rico, as before he finishes the song, when he gets down to the last few words of the song, he drops to a knee, finishes the words, and throws his fist up in the air. I salute you. That image, it just. It was great. It was great to see somebody even engaged in the ceremony of the national anthem making his statement. So, my hat's off, and I salute Rico Lavella. Now, of course, the three other images that I find disturbing, and none of them are about people, about players taking a knee, but seeing the Washington football team with their racist name and then watching two black players on either side, well, actually more than two, the whole team lined up, arm in arm with Daniel Snyder, who is, to me, just the epitome of racism in the NFL, and kneeling during this. It's like they're trying to normalize and make this like it's okay, that Daniel Snyder and a team that, to me, its name alone has been so resistant. I mean, there's the level of hypocrisy and almost submissiveness by the players was demonstrated by Washington football players taking a knee with Daniel Snyder. The other one was the Cowboys. Jerry Jones, who was again very, very domineering, basically condemned this whole notion. He convinced his players to kneel with him before the national anthem, which kind of, I don't even know what that was supposed to represent. I mean, and again, to me, seeing that none of the Dallas Cowboys were willing or courageous enough to take a knee during the national anthem, which is not disrespectful, but it is the protest. For none of them to have the courage, I've got to say the Dallas Cowboy players are cowards, because they're so afraid of the threats that Jerry Jones and folks like Donald Trump have made about. I mean, what's Jerry Jones going to do? They're 3-0, the Cowboys. Is he going to fire his starting line, for crying out loud?
Not that I'm saying that money would deter folks, or is that big of a deal, but do you think that there is any conversations about, okay, well, if you do take a knee, then we're going to withhold?
Oh, no, but there's fines, and of course there are players who have lost sponsorship. Players in Denver and other places who maybe they're a spokesperson for like a car dealership or different businesses. They've lost some of that sponsorship because of the mischaracterization. Now, the final one that I got to bring up, and because I don't want to belabor the point, was Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis taking a knee with the Ravens. Ray Lewis has been the most outspoken opponent to this stuff. And he went down on two knees with his players. And when people said that he was being a hypocrite for his condemnation of taking a knee, he said, "I will never take a knee." He goes on television, I think ESPN or whatever else, says, "Oh, no, I wasn't taking a knee. I was on two knees. I was praying." And then just made a complete mockery, and then tries to play all this, I'm the preacher man now, and I have too much respect for the police, and I have I work too closely with with high level officials to to disrupt. I don't know, the whole thing, So I the great image that I had of again Rico Lavella taking a knee after singing the national anthem, and of course the hundreds of players who did take a knee. It was I don't want to overemphasize in Washington, Dallas or Baltimore's teams what they did, but I did want to mention it.
It's
All right.
also frustrating that locking arms is not the same thing as taking a knee.
No,
it's not the same gesture.
No, and it isn't. And the thing is that what came out of this covering the story is the realization that when Colin Kaepernick started this thing, first he was sitting, and he talked with a few people and said, "You know what? I don't want to be disrespectful, so I want to do a gesture that's not standing but isn't sitting either." So that's when he started doing the taking the knee. And I got to tell you, when this thing first started, this was during the Standing Rock stuff, and so I was among, and I'm not trying to take credit for this, but I certainly was among one of the first Native people saying, "Look, I stand with Standing Rock, but I also sit with Kaepernick," and I feel the same way. I mean, by the way, he's donated, I think, something along the lines of $1 million, really, but $50,000 to Standing Rock Health Center.
Oh, I
directly.
thought you were going to say Puerto Rico. Okay.
No, he's donated $1 million. Much of that money coming from his jersey sales, which are still doing very well, by the way. To everything from Somalia to Puerto Rico to Black Lives Matter, but also to Standing Rock. So I had to mention that. All right, look, I've got Ade Williams on the phone, who is I'll let him kind of introduce himself. WBAI is sponsoring an event at the Apollo this weekend, so let me have Ade kind of fill us in. Tell me about the program. Give me as many details as you can, and just what people can expect.
Well, first off, thank you for having me.
Sure.
And in answer to your question, I am the Associate Director of Community Programs at the Apollo Theater, and I help to create and produce a series called Apollo Uptown Hall, and that's the event that we're partnering with WBAI.
Okay, that's great. Now, this is both entertaining and informative. I know you have a panel, and we're going to have one of the panelists on right after you. But talk to me about what the evening really entails.
So first off, I mean, as you said, the Apollo, we're fortunate that we are known throughout the entire world as one of the world's great cultural institutions and great entertainment venues. What a lot of people don't know is that we're a community theater and we address community issues. So since our inception, we've had everything from local street activists to the presidents of the United States of America take our stage to address our audiences. And one of the things that the Apollo, it's interesting because you talked about in the previous segment about players being active and taking a stand or taking a knee or what have you. Well, if you know anything about the Apollo, you know that our audience is never passive. Like, just for an entertainment show, the audience always lets you know if they're digging what you're doing, if they love you, or if they don't. And if they don't, they are quite vocal. So between the tradition of having speakers address issues at the Apollo and knowing that we have an active audience, an engaged audience, we created Apollo Uptown Hall. So this Saturday, September 30th at 4 o'clock p.m., we're doing Apollo Uptown Hall Movement Required. It's hosted by WBAI's very own Imhotep Gary Bird. It is free and open to the public, although you will need tickets, but you can get the tickets for free at our box office or online. And we will be addressing two primary issues. The first is police-community relations. Again, you were just talking about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, and that was initially to protest police brutality. We're going to be talking about police-community relations. We'll start off by talking about the attack that happened in Philadelphia with an organization called MOVE, where the police actually dropped a bomb on a house and killed 11 people, like a literal bomb from a helicopter got dropped onto a house in a residential area, and 11 people died from that. So we're going to start with that conversation, and so we're going to show clips from the documentary about that called Let the Fire Burn. We'll have the film director there, and we'll have the sole living survivor of that attack, Ramona Africa, as a panelist.
Awesome. And
so we'll get into a larger conversation then about police community relations in 2017, and we will have panelists such as Graham Witherspoon, a former NYPD officer. We'll have Jerica Richardson. She's with the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board. And we'll have Tamika Mallory, who most people know from the Women's March. From there, we will segue into a conversation about the role that arts play in not only our communities, but in terms of shaping our society. And that is part of why we have Rachel Shapiro from the New York City Board of Education, and she deals with arts in the New York City schools. And we will have Solomon Jones, who is a personality from WURD radio station in Philadelphia, and Aisha Saku. And we'll also have the illustrious blacks from WBAI FM. So, oh, and most importantly for that particular conversation, we're going to have Mark Bamuthi Joseph. And Mark Bamuthi Joseph is the librettist of the opera that we will be doing in conjunction with Opera Philadelphia. So all of this is happening this coming Saturday, September 30th. It starts at 4 o'clock. Doors open at 3 o'clock. And again, this event is 100% free. People can go to apollotheater.org and get tickets, or WBAI.org to get tickets, or go to our box office to get your free tickets. The doors will open at 3, and the Illustrious Blacks will be spinning at 3 o'clock and making it nice and festive. And then at 4 o'clock, we'll start the conversation. As far as Mark Bamuthi Joseph, we are working with Opera Philadelphia, and we're creating this opera called We Shall Not Be Moved. And so the opera takes place in Philadelphia, and it's based on teenagers who are living in the building that had been bombed, the aforementioned building that was bombed by the Philly police. And so those teenagers are living in that building, and they are guided by the ghosts of the children who died in the bombing. So that opera is going to take place at the Apollo October 6th and 7th, and it is directed by Bill T. Jones. Mark Bamuthi Joseph is the librettist, and Daniel Bernard Romaine from Harlem is the composer. So it's going to be a first-class production, and so the Apollo Uptown Hall movement required kind of gives you a full scope in terms of the issues that the opera raises, and we can go into an in-depth conversation on this at the Apollo, and then the following week we have the opera. And in addition to that, not only will we have the conversation and film clips and performances and what have you, but we'll also have tables in the lobby to get people involved. So if you want to register to vote, there'll be a table there. If you want to buy books to be more conscious, there'll be a table there. If you want to find out different ways to support WBAI and their programming, BAI will have a table there. So all of this is happening this Saturday free of charge.
Again, what time?
So doors open at 3 o'clock. The music starts at 3 from the Illustrious Blacks, and then the panel discussion starts at 4 o'clock, again, moderated by WBAI's very own Hotep Gary Bird.
All right. Well, that's awesome. I thank you for giving us some of your time to kind of talk about what this is what is actually going on. And of course, nobody can say enough about just what a landmark and important institution the Apollo Theater has been, not just for New York, but for frankly the country. And I'm glad to hear such good work and so many of these issues. I mean, the whole move thing out of Philadelphia is something that it has been hard to keep people and make people aware. Ironically, it's amazing that even some of the political significant people of that time, although the building would be burned, their careers wouldn't.
Isn't that something? I do want to throw out one more thing. I think during this time where so much of what we listeners of BAI cherish are absolutely being assaulted by higher powers, let's say. I think it's important that we find ways to work together. So for this event, you've got one not-for-profit theater, the Apollo Theater. You've got a not-for-profit radio station, WBAI, working in partnership. Additionally, as I mentioned, the tickets for Apollo Uptown Hall this Saturday, they are free. So please get them. And then if you get the tickets for Apollo Uptown Hall, the next day at the Maisels Cinema in Harlem, they're showing the documentary Let the Fire Burn, which is a full documentary about the MOVE bombing.
Awesome.
And your free ticket for Apollo Uptown Hall will give you a 10% discount at the Maisels Institute, and that is a not-for-profit institute. And last but not least, Revolution Books is located in Harlem. They are not-for-profit, and your free ticket for Apollo Uptown Hall or for We Shall Not Be Moved will give you a 10% discount at the Revolution Bookstore as well.
Well, that's great. I mean, and that's the kind of collaboration that we really need to see more of. And again, this engagement is just just powerful. So again, Ade, I want to thank you for joining us here on Let's Talk, and we'll have you back.
I appreciate your help and time.
All right, all right. Thank you very much. Again, that's this weekend. That's the Saturday the 30th. Doors open at 3. Hey, something else I gotta mention about the 30th. On what would have been his 81st birthday, that Saturday, September 30th, you can join family and friends of Alambe Broth at the ceremony co-naming the southwest corner of West 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard as the Alambe Broth Way. You can they'll meet there at that corner at 11 a.m. Saturday, September 30th. Afterwards, there will be a gathering on the second floor of the art gallery at the nearby Adam Clayton Powell office building from 1 to 3. So, look, if you're looking for a full day of entertainment and an engagement and honoring some of these powerful names, these powerful people, then you can start by heading over to what will ultimately be called Alambe Broth Way, and again, that's at the corner of West 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard, and I'd like to see some folks there. There will be some WBAI folks mingling in the area as well, so that's just another opportunity to be engaged in some of what's happening. Almost all the time. So I wanted to mention that. We'll go to a break here. We'll take a little bit more of Dark Water Rising with Charlie Lowry, and we'll take that break. When we come back, we're going to have Rachel Shapiro, who's one of the panelists at this event, join us. So we'll do that as soon as we come back.
Don't cry, I really didn't mean it. In my own way, we were playing a game. It goes up and down, around, running each other into the ground. You say you're leaving, I say don't go away. Pieces of you, pieces of me. Pieces of you, pieces of me. Yeah. Pieces of you, pieces of me. Shattered like a broken dream, and I just end up calling your name. Pieces of you, pieces of me. Tattered, hanging by a string. I just end up calling your name. Stay a little longer. Don't walk out of that door. Mi amor, stay a little longer. I don't want this anymore.
All right, thanks for coming back. That's a little bit more Charlie Lowry. Obviously, some great vocals. That's Charlie with Dark Water Rising. Great native group out of North Carolina, Tuscarora, North Carolina, down in the very bottom of the state. And I've had the pleasure to meet her on several occasions, including at the Native American Music Awards, which is coming up on October 14th at Seneca Niagara Casino. She also performed here in New York, down at the museum, at the Smithsonian Museum, on the Native American Museum, and that was quite an event as well. All right, let me get right back into it, talking about arts. Let me, do we have, okay, we got Rachel Shapiro on the line. Rachel, first off, let me welcome you to Let's Talk. I appreciate you taking some time to join us for the program.
Thank you.
Now, you are one of the panelists Ade was speaking of with this this Uptown Hall at the Apollo Theater. Talk to us a little bit about what you are trying to present as a panelist, and again, part of that, connecting the arts with activism and the like. Give me your thoughts.
Great, thanks. Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be a panelist in this really interesting community conversation. So I work for the Department of Education. I'm the Manhattan Borough Arts Director. So in that capacity, I support all of the public schools pre-K to 12 on the island of Manhattan, and actually also District 7, which is the South Bronx. And so, for me, arts really does equal social justice, and access to arts equals social justice. So to be part of this panel is a really wonderful opportunity to bring together these ideas and talk about why arts education matters, not only for all students, but particularly for students in communities that have not always had their voices heard equally.
Hmm. Well, I mean, and I don't know if you delve into just even the most broadest sense of art over, throughout history, it's always been a vehicle for expression and almost always expression of some sort of, contemporary happening, whether it's, social justice issues or not. I mean, and you can see this throughout time and probably none more so than now. Now, whether you're seeing the street art or whether you're seeing graphic art or music theater, any of this stuff, film, it is really now about capturing some of not just the conflict, but the solutions and all of that. So I'm moved by the work that artists specifically do in terms of trying to address some of these social justice issues.
And I think it's particularly interesting that this is, the genre of this is an opera, right? So if you think about opera, you think about primarily, an Eastern European, that's the history of it. But I also think of it as it's a highly, dramatic, overly expressive art form in general. So I think to be using opera to be looking at this particular topic is particularly interesting. And we think, yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's just, I think, a lot of it, when I think about having that art form and having that use of that expression, I think it's particularly interesting for the Apollos commissioning this, and I'm really looking forward to sort of seeing the way in which the genre of opera is used as a form of self-expression, but also as a way to bring light to this terrible story that happened that they're using.
Sure. Well, and then when I think about theater in a broader sense, you only have to look at the incredible success of something like Hamilton, and the role that has played in not only bringing some of those historical issues forward. Some, may not be 100% accurate, but
right.
but the idea of having that conversation and bringing those conversations forward. So no, I think what opera and theater, live theater in general, are the strides that are being made are incredible. I saw a show out in New Jersey that addressed the mascot issue. It was called Indian Head. And so that was, it's again, I'm moved when I see people who will take some of these issues into this creative art form. It's amazing.
And I'm thinking about the other panelists that are going to be involved. It's a very wide variety of people, right? So it's just very interesting that you have, they have a former NYPD detective. They have Aisha Saku, who I'm really looking forward to speaking with, who's done a lot of amazing work with gang-related violence and using the art form. And then, you have documentary panelists. And so it's a wide variety, right? So we have people from all these sort of different corners intersecting through the vehicle of this opera, which I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so the event again, as the day said, it's Saturday the 30th. It is doors open at 3. The panel discussion starts at 4. I think they'll be having some music being spun, prior to that, and it sounds like this is really an event that people should try to make some time for and learn. Again, this role that the Apollo Theater is now playing on issues that go beyond just plain entertainment, but the role of activism. Well, again, as per your part of the panel, the role of activism and art, advancing some of that stuff. I think that's what, frankly, that's what this entire, in some way, that's what this entire event is about.
And I think, you know what? I think we need that more than ever right now.
I think so too. I think so too. Rich, I want to thank you for joining us. It was great to have you weigh in and explain a little bit of what you're bringing to this event, and it should be a fabulous thing. So we all look forward to it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Okay. That's Rachel Shapiro. She's a part of one of the panels that will be addressing many issues, but her role is bringing a discussion forward on art and activism, which really have gone, like I said, hand in hand for a very long time, and frankly, now probably more than ever. I know that we spoke last night, Shawnee, and you had a couple of things that you wanted to, before we go to the calls in the second hour. You had something you wanted to present, so you want to go ahead and.
Well, there was an article I was reading about how Native American rape survivors, how we have all these obstacles against us. So I was just taking a look and reading about that and seeing where, seeing how hard it is to prosecute a non-native man on native land. So that, we talked about before this term of open season, what that means. And that basically means is that, in the dark corners of the internet, that there's like chat rooms of how to rape women. And one of the things that suggested, if you're non-native, to go onto native land where you can't be held accountable. But what I was reading is that in the Violence Against Women Act in 2013, they reauthorized that, so some nations are getting jurisdictions to be able to prosecute non-native men on their territories. So they started with 3 nations so far, and they're expanding to allow 2 more. And what they have to do to apply to be able to prosecute is send the arrest codes and the procedures. So basically, what the charges are going to be and what the procedure will be. So I don't know if you heard of this, John, but in Mahnomen County, which is where the White Earth Indian Reservation is, the entire county consists of the whole reservation. Mm-hmm. So the state police can have jurisdiction on the indigenous land. So I didn't understand how that was working, but if the nation doesn't have access to or to prosecute somebody, then the feds have to basically prosecute them, which obviously the feds don't take women's claims seriously or have time in their backlog. Even rape cases in like New York City and the state are so backlogged.
Well, and I think that the whole idea that Native people are so marginalized and Native women marginalized even farther because of inequity and gender issues in general. The problem on Native territories is some of this jurisdictional boondoggle, as they say. And even for the feds to get involved, there's certain standards that have to be met. So there's a lot of reasons for cops not to do things, and so that's kind of the way it plays out. But by the way, I am wearing my my brand new nice Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women shirt. We actually brightened up the colors. You notice it brightened up a little bit and raised it up a little higher. So so when you're wearing it, you can see it. You can find them on Teespring. You can see the links to it on my group pages. But and some of that was addressed even in the film Wind River. It talked about you have to really pay attention in the film, because unfortunately there's so much that they try to jam in there that you could miss the jurisdictional problems. Yeah. Now the pilot programs that you're talking about, that was introduced under the Violence Against Women Act, right. Where they recognize that part of the problem specifically with enforcing and prosecuting violence against Native women was the jurisdictional issues.
And they were the reason that Native folks can't charge non-native folks is because they're claiming that we'll be biased because it will be an all indigenous trial.
Well, that's only part of
to
the issue.
say-
That
well,
but
right,
that is
right,
it
yeah.
is clearly. I mean, that's really probably less of what is actually said, but really
But
felt.
yeah, for
Be-
sure.
because they think that would it ultimately turn into like vigilante justice kind of thing. And the irony of all this stuff is, like I said, even with native territories that have police forces and courts and all kinds of other stuff, they have been prohibited by federal law from prosecuting non-native perps, I guess, but people who have committed these crimes against Native people. They've been prohibited from doing so. And so with this pilot program, what they did is they've selected a few that they think meet the standards for U.S. law, and clearly that they are enforcing U.S. statutes. So I mean, this is not really the recognition of sovereignty. It is really the extending of either state or federal jurisdiction to certain native territories and native police forces or courts, and which kind of causes which is still difficult. I mean, my fear is that if somebody were prosecuted under these pilot programs, that if they were a white person with the resources and took this all the way up to the a higher level court, appeals court, Supreme Court, or whatever else, they would really be able to try to make a case for where does the originating authority come from for these police departments and these courts. Because in the past, there have been some of these debates that have gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. And in fact, there was a case called U.S. v. Lara, Billy Joe Lara, who was a native person, got involved in domestic with his wife or partner who was from a different native territory, on her territory. He ultimately had a restraining order placed against him, and he was actually banned from coming to his partner or his previous his ex's place. Showed up there, was a disturbance. The police showed up. He punched one of the tribal police officers in the face. So he was not only charged with a variety of things, but among them, he was charged with assaulting a tribal police officer.
Right.
Served like 30 days for it. But the feds came back and they wanted to charge him again because the police officer was actually a police officer authorized under the Office of Tribal Justice. He was a BIA cop, in other words. So he was. They said, no, we're going to charge you with assaulting a federal officer. So this case kind of boiled down to the double jeopardy claim. And what Billy Joe Lara was trying to say is, you can't prosecute me for that because I've already been prosecuted. And so this was a weird case where the native person was claiming, you can't prosecute me for this because I've already been prosecuted, by making the claim that where he was prosecuted was essentially a police department that fits in within the state federal jurisdiction model. And what the U.S. attorney had to argue was that no, the tribal police and the tribal courts do not get their authority from the federal government through U.S. statutes. They actually get their authority from inherent sovereignty. So my problem with this pilot program, because it isn't really recognizing that if a person goes onto a native territory, that they've left the jurisdiction of the United States and entered the jurisdiction of some sort of native authority. They're saying, no, we're going to let them prosecute you even though their originating authority comes from their own sovereignty. You can get into a whole debate. It's very, very problematic. And I think the attempt in trying to, trying to make these little fixes rather than addressing the underlying issue in totality is really a problem. I'm glad you brought this stuff up because I think people are still not aware. And if you do get a chance to go see Wind River, you still may leave there somewhat confused on why there's such a jurisdictional problem with dealing with a crime against a native person.
So for the differences in the nations, so like Haudenosaunee, we don't have any treaties with the government, and we also own our land and territory. So how does that play a role in this Violence Against Women Act? Because I'm assuming these other nations their land is.
One of the things that's different for us is that we aren't in the most remote territories, and where most of these problems exist in places like Wind River and some of these places,
Right.
you have very inadequate numbers of law enforcement of any stripe. On our territories, whether you're talking about Seneca territory, which is clearly around other jurisdictions, county,
Right.
county and city, and we're near Buffalo. Onondaga is near Syracuse. I mean, so we don't have this remoteness issue associated with it. So and what has happened is there was laws passed that we had no say in, which were called U.S. 232 and 233, which granted concurrent jurisdiction from the federal government to New York State on civil and criminal matters. So there is really no reason other than just plain bias for somebody who commits a crime against a native person on native lands within Haudenosaunee territory. The jurisdictional issues are really something that we fight. It is not something that the perpetrator of a crime can use as a shield. So it's a little bit of a different situation. I mean, we certainly have not yielded this authority to the state, but the federal government claims to have had some authority to do so. So that's where it gets a little bit convoluted there. So I don't know. It is a bit of a complicated issue, even as we sit here now. But at the end of the day, this is oftentimes the violence against Native women in particular is still lies more squarely within racist mentality
100%.
than it does with
100%.
with jurisdictional lines and with bureaucratic stuff. The use of overburdened bureaucracies not to prosecute these things is part of that underlying systemic racism that exists, and there's almost a unique racism that exists when it comes to Native people, and this is where when I talk about some of these issues, again, when you think about police violence, and I've always got to bring this up because this is what gets missed. Every time we talk about Black Lives Matter and we talk about the abuse of force that police use, even when it becomes a national discussion, they never cross that line into the abuse and the use of force that is applied on Native territories. And Standing Rock was a perfect example of everything from the misuse of even of some of the tools they have, like the concussion grenades, and the idea that that one young woman from New York almost had her arm blown off.
Yep.
I mean, it's funny when they blasted these concussion grenades and even the smoke, the tear gas bombs and everything else. You could read the rubber bullets, all that stuff. It said these things are not supposed to be used within a range closer than 10 meters. And yet there were people being shot with this stuff point blank range.
Absolutely.
Nobody was prosecuted from this stuff. So even when there's a clear abuse of the tools, the weapons they have at their disposal, not just even the general policy, but this is why there's unique racism that I talk about. This week, actually, I take it back. Last Tuesday, here in New York, there was an appeal of a beating case that took place back in '97 when the New York State Police attacked a bunch of peaceful protesters on the Onondaga territory who were condemning the deal that the chiefs were trying to make with the state to give Onondaga full control over the tobacco trade in the entire state. It was really a crappy deal, and many Native people had showed up at Onondaga to protest. And the chiefs called in the police, and the police attacked a bunch of people. And they ended up, settling with most of those people who were attacked, a couple of $1 million for a broad bunch of them. But about a dozen of the folks who were attacked didn't want to accept the deal because there was no owning it. There was no, there was not only was it a very, very poor settlement, but there wasn't enough exposure on what took place there. So that they fought that last year in the Northern District of Court of New York Court in Syracuse. and the judges threw it out, and so they appealed it, and it's been heard down here just last week in the second circuit. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things that people are completely unaware of. And the interesting thing is the case that was before that was heard in Syracuse, they wouldn't allow, when the Second Circuit had heard an appeal by the New York State Police, to have this whole thing dismissed in the first place. Sonia Sotomayor and two of the current people who are still sitting in the Second Circuit ruled in favor of the Native people. And this judge up in Frank Scullin up in Syracuse would not allow any of the information from Sotomayor's decision into the court. It's just absurd. Again, and I think this is what so many people just simply can't wrap their heads around, in terms of how biased these court systems are towards Native issues.
I mean, how biased is it towards rape survivors in the beginning? It's the only case that the victim or the survivor has to prove that it happened. So when it's a Native woman who's we already view, or not we, but police officers and things like that already view women who quote unquote claim to be raped as like a false allegation. They already go into it with the concern of the male that what's going to happen to their life.
Look at what the work that Betsy DeVos has been pushing forward to try to change the standard for to protect the accused rapist rather than to protect the victims on college campuses. They're trying to do a wholesale change in how rapes are dealt with on college campuses to protect the accused,
right?
More so than the victims. I mean, it's just incredible stuff. And
boy's future.
It just kind of shows you that even there are women who absolutely work against the best interest of women. And Betsy DeVos, Trump's nominee for education secretary, is an example of that. We're almost at the top of the hour, so why don't we'll take a break here. We'll play another Dark Water Rising tune. When we come back, we will start to go to your calls, and obviously you can feel free to address anything that we talked about, including our event last night about the rivers, the Hudson River. We look forward to hearing from you on any of these issues. So we'll go to your calls when we come back. This is John Kane with Johnny Rice. This is Let's Talk.
This is Imhotep Gary Bird inviting you to a WBAI free-for-all Apollo Uptown Hall. Movement required. Saturday, September 30th at 4 p.m. Yeah, it's Radio GBE back live at the Apollo. I'll co-moderate a community conversation and panel with Philly broadcast activist Solomon Jones discussing police community relations and the role of artists as activists. We'll also revisit this year's anniversary of the historic deadly clash between the government and the citizens of Move through the eyes of 2017. Plus, we'll feature an excerpt of the acclaimed film Let the Fire Burn with director Jason Osdorf and deal with the question, what you gonna do if they come for you? Also joining us, civil rights activist Tamika Mallory, Mark Bamuthi Joseph of We Shall Not Be Moved, former NYPD detective Graham B. Witherspoon, and WVAI's illustrious blacks. Apollo Town Hall, movement required. Saturday, September 30th at 4 p.m. live at the Apollo. Register in advance for your free tickets. Visit WBAI.org or ApolloTheater.org.
Because we remember Lynn Stewart, the late great people's lawyer, we will always organize to free U.S. political prisoners. We also recall that Dick Gregory fasted to free Lynn from her unjust imprisonment. This is Ralph Pointer. On October 6th, please join me, Assemblyman Charles Barron, Black freedom fighter Sekou Odinga, and many other activists, BAI hosts, musicians, and poets, as we celebrate Lynn's legacy and address the task ahead in winning freedom for political prisoners. We'll also show a documentary in progress about Lynn's life. That's Friday, October 6th from 6:30 to 10 p.m. at Theater 80, St. Mark's, on St. Mark's Place between 1st and 2nd Avenues in Manhattan. For more information, go to lynnstewart.org or call 917-853-9759. That's 917-853-9759.
Hi, this is Christian McBride, and you're listening to WBAI New York 99.5 FM and WBAI.org on the web.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk. We got Johnny Rice in studio. Let me give the number out. We're ready to take your calls and to have you join the program. The number is 347-335-0818. That's the number to call to be a part of this show. Again, it's 347-335-0818. I'm writing it down in front of me so I don't have to look up on the wall to remember it. As we speak, I think there's obviously plenty to talk about, and I try not to, put an overemphasis on some moronic thing that Trump said this week or last week or anything else, and I still give my support to what Colin Kaepernick was representing by taking a knee, first taking a seat, Absolutely. Then taking a knee, and it really. After Trump's comments, a bunch of NFL owners came out and condemned his comments and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't give them a pass. I mean, keep in mind that Colin Kaepernick, who is better than at least 50%, maybe 70% of the NFL players who have contracts with the NFL. He's better than almost half of the starting quarterbacks. And certainly you would think because he was a starting quarterback, he should be regarded as better than the second and third string quarterbacks. But he has been blackballed. There are teams like the New York Jets right here who flat out said, nope, we won't even consider him. So it's and it's only because he has had the presence of mind and the courage to stand up and say, look, I know that I'm a high-paid athlete, and I may be a wealthy athlete and a wealthy black man, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to stand up for not only for whatever racial profiling and that kind of stuff that he may come into contact with. Because let's face it, if money does have sway in some of this stuff, but by the same token, if you're a black athlete, you have family, friends, relatives, all kinds of people who do not have the name recognition that you have. They do not have the wherewithal to protect them from the burden of racial injustice. And so, when people say, well, what are all these overpaid rich athletes? So, why are they, belly aching? Look, they're not doing this for themselves. Not for the most part. They're doing this for the fact because of the fact of the matter is you still had a 13-year-old kid get shot down in for playing with an airsoft gun in Cleveland without any prosecution. And in fact, there hasn't been with rare, very, very rare exception. There has been no indictments, no prosecutions, no convictions of officers who have committed these crimes against unarmed black men. And as a Native person, I've got to say flat out, there are demographics where Native people actually have a higher rate of death by cop, at least based on our population. It's not a total number that's higher because we're such a marginalized population. So I am very sensitive, and so when we talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women, I don't think it's I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the injustice that happens to Native men in some of these the social injustice issues. So I just have to bring that up. All right, do we have a caller on the line? All right, caller, you're up first. What's your name and where you're calling from?
From Diane from the Bronx.
Hi, Diane. Thanks for being a part of the show and calling in.
Oh, I thought I had missed you. I want to tell you thank you so much for your show in general. I listen as often as I can. And on the Kaepernick story, what is his first name?
Colin.
Okay, and then you said there was he's doing T-shirts. That's how he's getting income.
No, I'm saying that his jersey, which is still for sale as NFL merchandise, his jersey as the former quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers is still one of the highest, one of the fastest or the highest selling jerseys in the NFL. So he still, even though he's not signed with the team, he still gets a royalty from his jersey being sold by the NFL. So when people buy an NFL a Colin Kaepernick jersey, he still gets money from that, and he's been pledging that money towards. He pledged $1 million, which I think he's committed over $900,000. You can actually go to Kaepernick, and it's spelled KAEPERNICK 7. That was his number, so it's Kaepernick7.com. And if you go to that website, you can see what he has done with his donations, how he's progressed in terms of his personal commitment to funding various things, and it gives the whole breakdown.
Oh, that's great, and I think we should be supporting him in that way. That's a backdoor way to really put something in his pocket and make it not be so disastrous.
Well, and he's never complained about his own financial situation. I mean, he'd still like to play football because he's a football player. I mean, there are many, and I'm kind of in that camp that I'm indifferent about him, playing for the NFL at this point. But obviously, I would support his choice. But there's a part of me that would love to see him do it because I like to see him, put some egg on some faces by coming out and doing a decent job. Yeah. But no, he's never cried poverty here, and I think there's a whole lot of people who've suggested because he didn't get signed that he's singing the blues about not being able to make the millions of dollars that he's made. Look, he's made plenty of money and he's managed his money well. He is not he's not without means, put it that way. He wouldn't be able to donate $1 million of resources that were going to him if he didn't have the ability to take care of himself. Now, having said that, he is still just like when Ali took his stance against the Vietnam War and was stripped of his title and then was not allowed to box through the prime of his career. Colin Kaepernick is 29 years old. He's still in what is considered the prime of his athletic career. He would still be able to play football for a good length of time, and he's being denied that because of the bias. And I don't care what the NFL owners have done in terms of condemning Trump's comments. They have still not been receptive to signing the guy who started this whole thing, and he's still bearing the brunt of much of the animosity. I mean, what's crazy is I've listened to these rednecks these red meat football fans who are condemning this. I saw somebody showed a guy from Washington burning all his Washington Redskins stuff and saying that he hates this team now. So I watch all this stuff. Nobody had the outrage when they were flying a Nazi flag beside an American flag, in Charlottesville.
Wow.
All these white supremacists, they put the American flag up right beside the rebel flag and the Nazi flags and all this other stuff, and nobody's outraged by that. But a black man simply taking a knee to say, "Look, I can't, I can't support a flag of a country that is not applying justice equally, to people of color." That's simply what he said. He's not, deriding America as an institution or the ideals that the flag is supposed to represent or the anthem is supposed to, when they say land of the free. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to have objection to the national anthem. It was written by a slave owner. A slave owner, by the way, who was pissed because some of his own slaves wanted to fight alongside the British because they were promising them freedom. So the third verse of the Star Spangled Banner, I say blather, but Star Spangled Banner, actually talks about washing away the footsteps of these slaves with their own blood, and that they would find no refuge from the grave for wanting freedom. I mean, that's what this Francis Scott Key wrote. So the song, and that's not even what Colin Kaepernick was condemning. He wasn't condemning the anthem in of itself. He's saying, look, it isn't the land of the free. And when people say the flag, well, he's disrespecting the flag, and the flag stands for all this other stuff. I gotta say, look, I'm Native, so I have a different view of how oppressed Native people have been by by American policy, European policies for that matter. But one thing that's got to be clear: the American flag is a symbol of colonization. The 13 stripes represent the 13 original colonies that would seek independence from its mother country. But so it's about colonialism. The 50 stars represent the states. Many of those states, which frankly, should never have become states. They were supposed to be Indian country. They were supposed to be, set aside lands. Hawaii, which was illegally occupied at the turn of the century, even before Roosevelt went on his tear to the Philippines and in Guam and Puerto Rico and other places like that. So we could argue that the flag, oftentimes, if you look at it technically, it is the symbolism of westward expansion, manifest destiny, and colonization. Mm-hmm. It isn't a symbol of freedom. We can say that it is, but if the freedom of liberty and justice for all is not really liberty and justice for all, then you've got to say, well, then rather than condemning what the flag is supposed to represent or the anthem, let's fix it. And so what Colin Kaepernick is taking a knee for is saying, I want there to be liberty and justice for all. I'm not condemning that notion. I'm not condemning the notion of land of the free. I want it to be the land of the free. So what these protests are advocating improvement and making the country better, not tearing it apart. And and the idea that people will say, well, since when is protesting for the good of humanity anti-patriotic? I think that's just the opposite. That's to say that Martin Luther King was not patriotic, or anybody. I mean, and of course the other thing they do is they try to tie this to the troops, and that's another thing that I find disturbing. Every time I hear somebody say, I served in the military to fight for your freedom of speech. No, you really didn't. I mean, there's a 1,000 reasons for people to enlist in the armed forces. Some of it is out of patriotism, and I don't take anything away from that. But to suggest strapping on a uniform and putting a rifle over your shoulder and then being engaged in Vietnam, in North Korea, in Desert Storm, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, I mean, how is that advancing my or your right to speak freely, especially if you drop to a knee, you saying that the son of a bitch should be fired? I mean, that's the hypocrisy of it all.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, for calling in and weighing in. And again, that's where Colin Kaepernick has been generating the revenue that he's been donating. Much of it is coming from the jersey sales, the sales of his San Francisco 49ers jersey, which is pretty remarkable. Hey, the number is 347-335-0818. That's the number to call to be a part of the show and weigh in on any of the things that we talked about or anything that you might want to talk about. All right, caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller, where are you? We got you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Brooklyn. My name is Mr. Brown.
Hi, Mr. Brown. Thanks for calling.
Now, I listen to you every day that he comes on, and today, what I listened to is I don't understand the law of the.
Sir, can you turn whatever you got down on in the background, whether it's the radio or the television?
Right,
we're getting a lot of feedback.
Talking about the.
I'm sorry. I can't hear you because you've got something blaring in the background. You got to turn down the radio or the television. Otherwise, we can't hear you very well.
Oh, well, let me turn it off.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
Because there's not.
Yeah, okay. All right, go ahead. So,
right, there's no justice. There's two laws. A law for the Caucasian and a law for the indigenous people and other groups of people in this country. And that is well established. So what Trump is saying is that by the Catholic Pope, that the Eurocentric were God sent to control this earth, and whatever they lay down is being still administered to us, because they call us the minority, but it's not so. We are the majority, not the minority. And the time is coming when they will have to face their justice. Justice must be dispensed equally. You give to America right now.
Well, and again, if it's not equal, then there is no justice. And you do make a good point. And I want to put a little bit of a finer point to it. There are underlying parts of the U.S. law that are clearly unjust, and part of it, you mentioned the Pope and the Catholics. I mean, and I've talked about the doctrine of Christian discovery. The fact of the matter is, there's a whole body of U.S. law that they call federal Indian law, which is not our laws; it's laws about us. But the whole idea of subjugating Native people and not respecting our inherent sovereignty comes from this notion that the Christian nations of Europe, and this was talked about in the previous program on Tiokasin's show, the Christian nations of Europe through the Pope and through the Vatican determined that Native people were beneath the level of humanity that the Christian nations of Europe had reached, and so they would suggest that if a Christian nation would come upon a land formerly unknown to these Christian nations, they could claim it for themselves, and they could subject the people to slavery or take their possessions, take their land, dispossess them of their land and their possessions, and that has been enshrined in federal law through a couple of court decisions in the 19th century, and they still lie at the basis. So when I talked about that U.S. 232 and 233 that grants state jurisdiction to New York State on civil and criminal jurisdiction, that is still based on this foundation that simply because white people discovered a native territory that they could subjugate us. There's never been a lawful transfer of native sovereignty, certainly not within the Haudenosaunee, but within And I don't know of any native territory, even with all the treaties that have been signed, Fort Laramie and that kind of stuff. None of these treaties transferred the inherent sovereignty of native people to the federal government or to state government. And so, I guess to your point, Mr. Brown, yeah, there are two sets of laws. There's a law where people, they see in the Declaration of Independence where it said that the just governance comes from the consent of the governed. Well, unless you're native or unless you're black. And there it was imposed, and that it is imposed without legal foundation. So if federal Indian law enshrines all of this subjugation and all of this jurisdiction to the federal courts when we never consented to it, and we're not born of people who consented to it either. This is that double standard. So on that, you're correct. All right, let me give the number out again. It's 347-335-0818. That's the number to call to be a part of the program and to weigh in on any number of things that we've talked about and something you might want to talk about. All right, caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm Joe from the Lower Manhattan.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for calling and being a part of the show.
Yes, thank you. Can I speak?
Sure.
Yeah, I would just like to expand on what some of the speakers were saying about this black athletes taking the knee, protesting white supremacy and racist injustice, and it helps, but it's not going to solve the problem. As some of the speakers were saying, the flag represents much more than racism and genocide. This country spends tens of millions of dollars on our taxes every year to pay for these these huge patriotic military exercises, get flyovers at sports events, because it really fears a decline in military recruitment and the patriotism of people. And the war in Vietnam showed that, the moral support of the public and the troops was far more powerful than all their weapons put together. So the idea is, if we don't address the fact that this country was built on 250 years of racist war, with the exception of just 21 years, all those years were involved in racist wars, enslaving people. And if we don't attack that as the reason for our troubles today, where we're spending trillions of dollars on more wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Korea, Yemen, Somalia, you name it, if we don't address this fact that all those trillions of dollars are being used to prop up the arms industry, if we don't link that to the racism and the white supremacy fight back, we're not going to go anywhere.
I can't agree with you more on that. I think I think what you're saying is right on. I mean, when I hear, look, I think people should.
I'm a Korean War veteran from 1952. And I understand what war does to people, how they infuse us with racism and get us to kill people. It's not the soldiers and it's not the police. It's a goddamn racist society that nobody wants to attack. All those ships that came here to discover the United States, they were all funded by capitalist forces that say, bring me back slaves, bring me back gold. If we don't attack this system that functions for profit instead of people's needs, we ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, I agree with you, and you can see things unraveling. I mean, and I think that's where, and what happens is, people look at racism as being empowering to white supremacists, and on one hand that's true, but on the other hand there's a fear, and and that's why there's this thing called that's been labeled white fragility, which is the fear of it all slipping away. And I think what Donald Trump ran on was that fear and getting his base supporting him. When you see people who are these devout football fans burning their merchandise because a black man took a knee during the national anthem. I mean, you also hit something else. Look, the amount of money that the military is spending to sponsor pro football to try to gain favor from these people is incredible. And for everybody who says, I heard somebody say that Art Rooney, who owned the Pittsburgh Steelers, was rolling over in his grave. when Art Rooney was really involved in the operations of the Pittsburgh Steelers, they didn't play the national anthem in front of football players. Football players were in the locker room during the national anthem. They may have played it at the events, but they didn't parade the players out there. It was in 2009 when the military started spending a lot of money in sponsoring the NFL. They said, can you bring the football players out? Because we want the cameras on them standing up. There was no NFL rule.
Scout? They got the troops all over the field.
Oh yeah, they parade. They do, like you said, they do the flybys with the jets and the bombers and paratroopers, and they, in color guards and everything else. Yeah, they're trying to romanticize the war machine of the United States at these popular sporting events. They did it with NASCAR. They've done it with with other sports venues. And you're right. I think it's because they're trying to propagandize what they are and what they do and look, I believe in defending yourselves, but let's face it, the U.S. military is a global dominant power. And when you think about the trillions of dollars that's going into the U.S. military, I'll tell you, if those dollars are supposed to maintain global peace, well, they suck at it because there is no global peace. I mean, when you think about the conflicts that exist on so many continents that the U.S. military has a hand in, then you either got to say that the United States military and the decision makers who are governing this institution are either inept, or that we're being fed something that's simply untrue. It isn't about maintaining peace. It is about maintaining dominance and about, when they say protecting national interest, it is their arms dealers, but it's also oil industry and also access to resources.
How about imperialist profits? That's what this whole country was built on for 250 years, financing itself by going into other countries, stealing resources and labor.
Absolutely.
So if we don't attack that, we're just defeating ourselves. Like there's $360 billion every year difference just between what they pay black and Latin families and white families for the same work. We got to attack a system that is constantly stealing from its people.
Well, and that system, I mean, when I hear Donald Trump condemning China, when it's American companies that are going to China to exploit cheap labor and cheap resources. I mean, China's not stealing jobs. Mexico's not stealing jobs. It's the greedy corporations that drive the politics of the United States that are looking for the next, the next slave labor, the next, free resources, the next dumping grounds for their toxic materials. I mean, that's really the fact of the matter. Joe, I want to thank you. Your comments were great and spot on, and it's nice to hear a listener saying these things, because sometimes, we can get a little high on our soapbox here when we got a microphone in front of us. So,
a listener to say those things, somebody who's a war vet,
absolutely. Hey, the number to call again, it's 347-335-0818. That's the number to call to be a part of the show. Look, I know we're going to come into the into fund drive here, so we will not see a lot of talk back for the month of October. So. I hate to sound desperate, but this is probably your last chance for a while, to sound off and be a part of the show. Let's. I know we got a call on the line, so we'll hang on for them. But we'll take a break right now, and then we'll come right back to the caller, and we'll run it through to the end after that. So let's take a break for now, and we'll be right back.
And you're tuned to WBAI, listener-supported radio in New York. Is that okay? What do you want me to do, a bunch of them?
When we look back under the Orange Man's years, we're going to see a lot of bad things, and people are going to be very disappointed.
Brooklyn Council member Jamani Williams.
One of the things that we're going to look back, and not the least of which, is what happened with the press under this time. Anytime you have fascism. Anytime you have dictatorial leadership, the press is always attacked. And we've seen the press attacked over and over and over again. But we have to have places where the public can not only feel comfortable going, but feel that they have a part and a stake in the news that is put out. And there was none other bigger in New York City than WBAI.
Listener-sponsored non-commercial WBAI. Become a member. Phone 516-620-3602 and make a pledge. Or go to your smartphone and enter 41444 and text WBAI.
Too public to fail. Too public to fail. Too public to fail.
Another's
All right, thanks for coming back. Hey, we're gonna run straight through to the end with calls, but before I do that, let me again remind people that this weekend we do have the Uptown Hall event at the Apollo, and that starts at 4. The doors open at 3 at the Apollo Theater. It's a free event, but you do need to get tickets for it. WBAI is a sponsor for that event, and it sounds like a great event to participate in. Also, as I mentioned, they are co-naming the corner of West 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard as Alambe Broth Way. And that ceremony is starting at 11 a.m. at that corner, and after the ceremony, the naming, there will be a gathering at the second floor art gallery of the nearby Adam Clayton Powell office building from 1 to 3. So Saturday you could have a lot of activity just in that one general area. So that could be interesting. Now the other thing is, I'm not sure if we're going to be on next week, so I want to take the opportunity now to talk about Indigenous Peoples Day, which is coming up, formerly known as Columbus Day. I say that with some chagrin. There is an event that is being planned on Randall's Island for the 8th and 9th to commemorate Indigenous Peoples Day. I might make it down for that. I'm still indifferent. I'm trying to work it out. I'm also going to participate in an event with Mario Murillo at Fordham. I may do it by Skype if I'm not in the area, but that's on the 9th as well, that afternoon. So I don't know, or that evening. So we'll see what things look like. But what specifically? Give me some more information that you have.
So I'll 100% be there both 8th and the 9th. 8th, you can go to Randall's Island. They'll have some vendors up and some dancing, and you can stay the night there because of the women from Hawaii come and lead the water ceremony at 7 a.m. On the 9th, on Indigenous Peoples Day. So something that we're doing this year is the Anti-Columbus Day Tour, which we'll have shuttle buses at Randall's Island, so you can come with your family and you can come with your friends. It'll bring us to the Natural History Museum.
Museum of Natural History.
Museum of Natural History. Lord, yeah, it's a mouthful. So then what we're going to do is...
you got to take a note at the statue in front of that Museum of Natural History, too. I mean, that's the Teddy Roosevelt statue on a horse with a half-naked Native person and a naked black man beneath him. And just look at it and shake your head, please, do.
I'm sure that'll be the first thing, because we're meeting in front of the museum, so I'm sure that's going to be something that we know. So the purpose of the tour is... to remove the white supremacist statue in front of the museum, to rename the day to Indigenous Peoples Day, to respect the ancestors, and then really examine what this day and what Columbus represents to both Indigenous and Black communities, specifically on this land. And so that is going to take place Monday the 9th. And the shuttle buses are going to start running at 3:30.
And they're going to run from there
Randall's
to
Island
Randall's Island
to the
back and
Museum
forth?
of Natural History.
Okay, all right, all right, cool. All right. Let me get right back to it. I do want to get to the calls again. I know we'll probably have several weeks throughout this month that we won't be able to do this. Even if we're on, we probably don't do calls during the fund drive. So this is it for several weeks. So let me go to the caller. Caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, Hotep, beloved family, John and Shawnee, and all out there. This is my act calling from the cave. I tell you, I want to talk about the unraveling of the world, but it seems like the phone system is also unraveling. I got disconnected 6 or 7 times, but I'm glad to get through. I want to go back to something I brought up a few weeks ago, and unusually, you sort of skated away from it. So I want to go back to it because when we bring up conspiracy or conspiracy theory, that's a concept that got created by the CIA when researchers and authors went into what really happened around the JFK, as the occultists say, the killing of the king. So I want to go back to what's particularly what's happening in Puerto Rico. I mean, those of us who look into things like if there was an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, or even a sun flare where the grid would go down, it is projected that 90% of the U.S. population would die. So we have such a situation right now in Puerto Rico in terms of they're being off the grid and not likely to get off the grid within any time before 6 months. You have such a crisis, and of course, Donald Trump and his cohorts, they should have had that ship, U.S. Comfort ship, hospital ship, that should have been ready right after the storm. It's going to take 2 or 3 more days, and they don't have the mentality, or maybe they do. Maybe it's like with what was Katrina, where the objective was to cause as much carnage as possible. So that's what we're looking at, okay? Now, I want to go back to what's really going on, and that is, and I want to give a reference where people can research this. These folks have the technology to create hurricanes, to steer them, and et cetera, and even earthquakes, because they grabbed Tesla's technology. I'm talking about Mexico. And, it is so many things that came on the same day in 1985. These people are occultists. And if people would go to geoengineeringwatch.com, it's right in place there. So whether it's their technology of HARP with the chemtrails, this is really real. And we need to understand that when these people have technologies, whatever it is, they're going to beta test them. They're going to try them out. And, of course, the Georgia Guidestones, one of the cabal put up, talking about monuments, they put up a monument to the idea to reduce the Earth's population drastically, and we very, very might be on that way. The situation in Puerto Rico, I'm sure when you come back on air, you'll bring some guests. Nelson Dennis would be good on that, but this is genocide, and it's going down, and I'll listen over the air to your response. Thank you.
All right. Look, it's true. I don't spend a great deal of the show. I provide a vehicle for listeners to call in, and there are things that I am fully prepared to completely wrap my head around, and most of the issues that I am committed to are the things that I could say that I know and I witness as a fact. And look, I know that the U.S. military and the powers that be in the United States would love to control weather. I just don't know that they have this, the ability. I think it downplays the power of the planet significantly to suggest that somebody with a switch of a throw of a switch is going to create a hurricane or steer a hurricane. I think that they would love to, and I think there are circumstances where maybe weather has been affected. Certainly, I mean, it's taken 200 years of capitalism to affect global the climate change. So the idea that somebody with an array of antenna, and I know they exist, with some incredible radio signal is going to create or steer or traffic hurricanes to wipe out populations. Look, I think man has a role in that. I'm not sure that the technology. I think that's giving man far too much credit to think that they could overcome or somehow be that domineering over the natural systems of the world. I am concerned about the impacts that man has had on the natural systems, but to be that directly involved in controlling it, I think I'm sorry. I know that there are people who advocate strongly this stuff. I will say that it is an absolute travesty what is happening with Puerto Rico and what the United States has done to Puerto Rico with its vulture capitalist in destroying this island paradise, this absolute island paradise that once was, and turning it into an impoverished territory, and the fact that Donald Trump seems to be so ignorant in his capacity as the president of the United States if you have the global domination of the U.S. military, and you can't manage to get ships in place to support a U.S. territory that has been decimated by a hurricane. I mean, this is again the failure of the American system. Mm-hmm. People forget what happened when the Japanese Empire was dominating the South Pacific. Do you know what the United States did with its territory, Guam? It left it. All of the white people, all of the U.S. officials in Guam left Guam, and they didn't defend it against Japan. So when finally the United States did engage Japan after Pearl Harbor, people want to ignore the fact that the United States, with its so-called U.S. territories, did not step up and defend Guam. And I would say the same thing about what's happening in Puerto Rico. The United States has left its powerful elite to just wreak havoc on Puerto Rico, including the Jones Act and some of these laws that make the cost of even just basic products in places like Hawaii and Puerto Rico just go through the roof because of, again, why? Because the Jones Act was a maritime law put in place so that American business interests could be protected and not be undercut by foreign trade. And so this is again an anti-trade act, and what it does is it's made it so product can't even go directly to Puerto Rico. It's got to come through an American merchant vessel. It's got to land in the continent first before it gets to Puerto Rico. And same thing with Hawaii. And that's why a gallon of milk costs $8 in Hawaii. I mean, so these policies, even John McCain, who I'm not a particular fan of, although ever since he's lately he seems to be the only Republican that's demonstrating any reason. John McCain has called to abolish the Jones Act because he sees. As a Republican, he sees how much this is, how adverse it's been to places like Hawaii and Puerto Rico. So, no, I think American policy has been really detrimental especially to these territories that they've claimed. But the other thing I want to say is, for all of the news coverage of somebody going into a shoe store and stealing Jordan sneakers out of a shoe store, and again, always finding like there's no such thing as a white looter, right? They always find black people to put on camera and show them taking shoes out of a shoe store. I said it before last week, and I'll say it again. The looting is really what happens now. In the cleanup and in the recovery and the restoration of these sites. You go back to the 12th ward of New Orleans and see how many of those people who had their meager lives wiped away with Katrina were able to come back and have a place to live. most of those people found themselves, stuck in Houston, only to face the Harvey that came by recently. I mean, and the same thing is going to be happening in Puerto Rico. This storm is going to be used as a way to clean the slate, so a new round of venture capital can take place in Puerto Rico,
Absolutely.
and the mass exodus of much of the Puerto Rican population are going to find themselves scrambling for dwellings here in New York and in other places and be denied access back to their own territories. I would fully support if Puerto Rico were to ever actually vie for its independence, and it's ironic that in that era of decolonization that took place after World War II with the UN. It's interesting that you had countries all over the world that managed to gain independence from Great Britain and from Spain and other places, and yet the United States, the territories that it took, and I say took, so Hawaii, Puerto Rico, the Philippines. It was much more difficult for, and in fact, it didn't happen. I mean, it's the hypocrisy and the absolute contrast in how the United States has been able to manage to build its empire. Look, let me give you the number out again. The number is 347-335-0818. That's the number to call. If you want to be a part of the show and join us here. Again, 347-335-0818. That's the number to call. All right, caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Peter from Middletown.
Hey, Peter. Thanks for being a part of the show.
Yeah, I've been catching your show every so often before I listen to Gary Null. I'm going to kind of change, listening to what you had to say, and a lot of it I agree with, and I think a lot of people know that that's exactly what's happening. But I'm going to change the tone a little bit. Everyone's talking about how terrible bad things are today. I'm going to be 68 my next birthday. So I was in and around New York in the late 60s and 70s in college. In the 1970s, in just a few years, there were 2,400 terrorist bombings in America. At Kent State, in 1970, the National Guard shot and killed the students on the campus. When we were anti-war protesting in the city, the construction workers would come down out of the buildings with clubs, okay? I actually was down there with a friend of mine from Queens who looked up, and it was his uncle who was going to beat him, didn't recognize him. So when you're talking about everything is so horrible and everything, talk about bodies coming back from war. We had 50, 60,000 from Vietnam. And the injured you couldn't even count. I mean, and the protests were all over the place. What the difference is, in my opinion, to a certain extent, is that there's so much digital communication now that what didn't exist then. I mean, I'm not even touching on the Freedom Riders and what happened down south. With the lynchings and right now it seems so bad, but you have no idea. I carried a number that would have sent me to Nam. We all did. I don't think you have a number, do you?
No.
So, I mean, it's a different situation. Now, I'm going to just touch on a couple of things. There seems to be a lot going back to like the founding fathers or slave on. There was a lot of Spain did more slavery than anyone. I mean, did John Adams run ships back and forth from Britain? No. I mean, that's a very broad brush. It's been a big problem, and I'm not going to minimize it. But, I mean, if I recollect, and I've read some on indigenous American Indian history, I mean, the tribes used to take hostages and slaves, right?
Not so much.
They did. Well, generally, if there was a lot of intertribal warfare,
what there was incorporation, and what would happen is that you would have like the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois were famous for.
Well, there was incorporation in the Roman Empire, and there was some incorporation in Spain. That's not. I mean, what the Northwest Territories originally here were like Illinois, Ohio, and so on. You know that the vote came up to make it slavery or slavery-free? Mm-hmm. Do you know how they voted? They voted no slavery in those. So, I mean, to pay like it's all been so terrible, I think a lot of it has to do with this, and it's been a great thing. Now, I'm really glad things are progressing to a point where the pimple's going to get burst and the pus is going to come out. Because and that's, you know, I'm not going to say Trump is good, but, you know, he freed people of bias, and he freed everyone to start to take the look, just like you are, and to use methods of communication that never existed. Now, they can propagandize us, but you can also be on the radio and have a website and do tweet, and the people can muster themselves, you know. And I think that's going to be very, very important and very positive. And I think we have to go through this. I think if someone says, as you just did, you know, the American, essentially saying the American system or experiment has failed. If you look back at the actual writings of the people who put it together, they knew this was never meant to be a finite system where we get it right once and keep it that way. They had a very good understanding from that particular time in the Enlightenment that, you know, human beings were very complicated, and the only type of system that will actually work is one that is extremely flexible, that continues to evolve, that deals with the crap that human beings will always, there are always going to be elements that are greedy, and it just has to be dealt with by the rule of law, not the rule of kings. And the only thing we have to fall back on to make it work is to constantly improve the rule of law. And we've now that we know so much more, and we've gone through a period where so many things have been leveraged in the wrong direction and need correction, we have to go back and look at, you know, we have to do what you're doing. Everybody has to actually begin to participate. And part of that participation can be biased people who burn Redskins. Let's, you know, I hated the years. I had major discussions with my son where, you know, you can't use the N-word and all this. I said, we should be using the N-word. We're white people. We know what they think. We're burying this. But, you know, all of a sudden with Trump, it's okay. We can go out there. Show it. We'll deal with it. You know,
well, let me address some of this, because I mean,
I'll listen to you on the air. But good luck with the show.
All right, and thank you for your comments. No, I think, and I, because I don't want even what you're saying, or at least what I think you're saying, to be mischaracterized. Look, I think some of the ugliness that is coming out now is a necessary thing to come out, because I think, I mean, obviously, when a black man got elected as the president of the United States, it began this process. Trump is a reaction. I mean, Trump is a product of the Tea Party and so much of the hate that boiled out of racism that was never gone but suppressed. And maybe putting a face on it and putting the ugly face on it is what is necessary. You know, they talk about, you know, the pendulum swinging, and anybody who thinks that the pendulum swung all the way to the left with Barack Obama being elected is quite wrong. You know, I would actually say that the pendulum, you know, was swinging fastest during his this term. I'm not blaming him. I mean, just by virtue of the color of his skin alone, you know, brought out so much animosity in the United States. But I think some of this ugliness does have to come out. You know, I don't think Trump set anybody free, and I think his rhetoric is painful. I think it's distasteful. I think it's ugly. But I kind of think it is a bit of a necessity. One of my problems with Hillary Clinton being the other choice was that it was just going to be more of the same. I will say one thing with Trump, it hasn't been more of the same. But I got to say, Peter, you bring up a good point, because when people say, when Trump is saying "Make America Great Again," you know, it comes back to that question. Well, when was America great? You know, when lynching was okay, when you had, you know, all of this kind of behavior and some of this oppression that was, I mean, people being forced to fight in Vietnam. I mean, when you think about what the United States what has transpired over the years, it is incredible. I mean, and to suggest that somehow there's a certain date and time that we could return to that was this utopian life for everybody. No, there was a period of time when perhaps it was a little bit more utopian for white people, but not for anybody else.
But that's the point. So I get what he's saying about, like, let's bring all this ugliness out and put it on the forefront. But it's always kind of been on the forefront. You know, like Trump is a reflection of our past, and he is here because of the fact that all of the ugliness and all of this racism and, you know, and all of the isms have been perpetuated for so long that he's now sitting in office. So I don't know that I can fully say, like, yeah, let's bring it all on the table, because we've been feeling this weight the whole time, you know. So for him to go out and call players SOB, I don't know what to say. You know, like we've known that, we've felt that the whole time. Communities of color, that's nothing new. So for us to be like, you know, like to say we'd rather have Trump than Hillary or whatever. I understand, like with Hillary, it would have been more of that, like, by the book, you know, politically correct statement and all that, but it's less abrasive.
Well, and no, and I guess the point that, and I'm not by any means have I never advocated for Donald Trump, not only to be the president or as he sits there now. I think he is I think he's an absolute disgrace. And you know, I don't consider myself an American, but I'm still embarrassed by the things that he says and does. And frankly, I hope he is impeached, and I hope you know, his entire administration goes down in flames. But having said that, things are going to get even dicier if that happens, because that loyal base. Exactly. I mean, the funny thing is that nobody will address, you know, the real potential for domestic terrorism. You know, that, you know, the McVeighs of the world who bombed like Oklahoma City, and you know some of these, you know, these religious nut cases like from Waco and all of this other stuff. This stuff has been you know, just breeding. And you know, I mean, when you looked at what Fox News, how much they would validate the Bundys as they were literally drawing beads on law enforcement, on federal law enforcement agencies in Nevada, and then ultimately would take over this place in Oregon. I mean, Fox News was calling those guys patriots. So these white right-wing militia groups, these are people that that there's a certain segment of American society fully embraces. And I don't know. This isn't just a boil that you're going to pop. I think that this, you know, that Americans are, you know, better strap in, because they're going to have to be ready for a pretty good long term to deal with this thing. It isn't going to get resolved in 2020. It's not going to get, or 2018. It's not going to get resolved in 2020. There is a real, you know, lesson that has to be learned in all of this stuff. And I think, you know, as Native people and people of color, one of the things that we realize is that we need to rely on white allies to help, you know, with these messages. We can't fight terror, racism, just as people of color.
Absolutely.
You know, and so when I bring this stuff up, I'm not trying to throw all white people under a bus. In fact, I hope some of the ugliness that is displayed by Trump and his followers wakes up a significant portion of white society to say, no, we condemn this. You know, and so, you know, that to me is the hope. But I'll tell you, this isn't something that's going to just pop and be over with. So, you know, that's if there's one place that I disagree with Peter is I don't think this is going to be a quick fix. I don't think it's going to be a quick fix. All right. Hey, look, I know I would have liked to got more calls in, and I know we kind of run through what we can. I'm not sure if I'll be on. We'll be back here next week. Stay tuned. You know, if you follow my Facebook group page, and I know not all of you are on Facebook, but if you follow my Facebook group page, we'll continue to get messages out there. Maybe we'll even you know, pop an episode out just on Facebook while you know, while we're off. But we are going into fund drive. Please do what you can. Reach out, you know, support WBAI. Let's get through this fund drive and raise as much money as we can so we can get back to regular programming afterwards. And look forward to seeing you when we're back. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you soon. Yahweh.
Because we remember Lynn Stewart, the late great people's lawyer, we will always organize to free U.S. political prisoners.